Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. We've had tremendous rains here in Nairobi, but I'll put up a photograph of what the city looks like early this morning in a moment. Macro thoughts, massive capitulation in the dollar. Longs have had to readjust and get out of their positions. And another interesting development has been the huge move in bond market yields. Move higher. 10-year German Bund yields are up 831% in the past few weeks, touched 7 basis points, 0.07, peak of the optimism around Draghi's quantitative easing. And now we are, as of this morning, at 0.727%, but I think we are lower still. And I think it is that move which is supporting the euro at the moment. And then look at this 30-year German Bund yield. The yields have tripled in less than a month, from 46 basis points to 139. I'll put up that image as well. Both these images I found via Twitter from Market Outperform. Home thoughts, I rather like that Pointing Man by Alberto Giacometti. And it was sold for auction for $141.285 million. The highest price for any sculpture sold at auction. I'll put up that image that Christie's tweeted. I was reading some Paul Theroux over the weekend, and from there I've gone to Doris Lessing. Theroux's very curmudgeonly at times. Life isn't only about what you accomplished, it's also about what you desired, what you dreamed, what was in your head, all those secrets. And I like that comment. And I'll put up a photograph I took earlier this morning of the city. It's been flooded, cars have been flooded, houses have flooded. And essentially Nairobi's built on a lot of rivers. And what's happened is partly it's the trash that's blocking the drainage, but more importantly, the problem is that a lot of land which was sitting on riparian land where the river used to flow was sold. People have built, and they're blocking the free flow of water, and I think that's compounding the problem. If you know Nairobi well, go to somewhere like Nazima Springs Road, where you'll see it is actually sitting on a river. Political reflections, both Washington, this is Badra Kumar, it was very interesting, both Washington and Moscow are in a chastened mood today, as the media briefings in Sochi strongly suggest they peered into the abyss and didn't like what they saw. Significantly, Kerry's entourage to Sochi had a notable absentee, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, the mastermind behind the regime change in Kiev in February last year. And he's not wrong. John Kerry tweeted, made a visit to the Zavokalny War Memorial with Foreign Minister Lavrov to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. Posted this photograph, and also said he had frank discussions with President Putin and FM Lavrov on key issues, including Iran, Syria, and Ukraine. And as I said yesterday, I thought opening another front in Ukraine blunted the pivot to Asia. And I think there's an increasing realization in the upper echelons of the US government that they were better off concentrating on pivoting to Asia. At least 43 Shia Muslims were killed and another 20 injured after armed men attacked a bus in Pakistan's largest city of Karachi. The bus belonged to members of the Ismaili Shia Muslim sect and was targeted by attackers at the Safura Chowk intersection in Karachi's eastern part on Wednesday. Then I saw these tweets. One is a candle vigil by activists of MWMKD at Karachi in memory of martyrs of the Ismaili bus attack. IS leaves pamphlets. I'll put up an image of one at site of Safura Chowrangi bus attack. Threatens more attacks. If it were known for certain that bin Laden had been shot like a fish in a barrel, it's still highly unlikely that there would be much to protest about it in the United States. Fair point. Euro continuing its spike higher, 114.12 last. The T-junction, it's crossed an important T-junction at 113.85, so we've really got to keep an eye on it. The dollar index is surely lower than when I started compiling this report. It was then at 93.57, it's lower still. Japanese yen is traded below 119, it's now back at 119.08. The pound, 157.77. Aussie has been on a flyer of late, but it's now 0.8082. India rupee 63.895. The South Korean won 1092.86. Rial 303.99. Egyptian pound 762.94. And the rand below 11.90. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. Investors bailed out of long dollar positions, took its index down below this level when this report was filed, bringing losses to nearly 7% from a 12-year peak of 100.39 set in March. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart of that as well. We're now trading 114.06, and this is a 2-month peak for the euro. Very strong rebound. I think what's assisted it has been this very unprecedented move in the bond market. Coming to commodity markets, the Telegraph tweeted, "Pigeon's blood and ruby fetches world record price of £19 million. It looked rather grand. Christie's, today's Geneva jewels saw a world auction record for a cashmere sapphire, which sold for $7.357 million. I'll put up the image of that as well. Gold at $12.15. Crude oil last trading at $60.10. That's the front contract. The next contract this morning was at $61.24. I'll put up a 1-month chart of that. Goldman Sachs is calling for a oil price dip. I tend to agree with them. The Venezuela bolivar has weakened roughly 43% since the start of the year on the black market to reach 300.72 per dollar, according to Dollar Today. International reserves in Venezuela fell to a 12-year low of $18.065 billion. Coming to Africa, there's been plenty of news out of little Burundi. Mr. Nkurunziza flew back from a summit in Tanzania, but the airport had been closed, the lights switched off, and it was totally unmanned. And that stopped him from landing. His plane reportedly returned to Tanzania. His own office tweeted 2 photographs of his arrival. He just arrived in Dar es Salaam for EAC summit on Burundi, and I'll put up those 2 photographs of him in Dar es Salaam airport. And of course, whilst he was visiting Dar es Salaam, we learnt this. Major General Godfroid Niyombare, the leader of the coup, said President Nkurunziza is dismissed. His government is dismissed too. And the question that is still open is whether Niyombare is acting alone, or is he doing this with a little help from the region's leaders. President Kagame, this is according to a court's report, said if your own citizens tell you we don't want you to lead us, how do you say I am staying, whether you want me or not? Of course, President Kagame will go for a 3rd term, and probably, and most definitely successfully. So basically, the courts are saying, you get this emergency summit being called in Tanzania. Nkurunziza is invited to explain himself. Cyril Ramaphosa, along with the U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, Linda Thomas Greenfield, were going to attend the meeting as well. And this is the interesting piece. The surprising thing was that Nkurunziza accepted the invitation. There's an unwritten, well-known rule of strongman autocratic leadership that you never leave town when your people are out in the streets calling for you to step down. This is especially true after your own military pointedly say they will remain neutral amid the protests. Lo and behold, as soon as Nkurunziza landed in Dar es Salaam, Niyombare, his former intelligence chief, whom he fired back in February, pounced. He dissed and dismissed his boss and announced he will form a national salvation committee to run the country. Meanwhile, East Africa's leaders released a statement condemning developments in Bujumbura, but are they really that upset? No one wants to deal with another civil war in Burundi and the destabilization that would cause. The last time the country experienced an internal conflict, the crisis lasted over a decade, left 1.2 million people displaced, 300,000 dead. So the manner in which they set up the summit is a little, how shall we put it, suspicious. I tweeted on Twitter and it got picked up by Quartz, saying that, when the EAC were saying that they did not approve of what had happened in Burundi, I said this is a little bit cute, given it looks like President Kikwete, others think it's President Kagame, laid a delightful trap for Pierre Nkurunziza. So he's been dismissed. A senior Burundi officer said on Wednesday he was dismissing Pierre Nkurunziza as president because his bid for a third term violated the constitution, as soldiers surrounded the state broadcaster building in the capital. The presidential office quickly rubbished the declaration by Major General Godefroy Niyombare, and they've been doing that all day, including early this morning. And I wrote about this Eyes on Burundi spillover risks from this debacle loom, and this was obviously written 10 days ago. And the point I was making is Burundi might be small, but the spillover risks for the rest of the EAC were very, very high. I, of course, love that quote from Speed and Politics by Paul Virilio. And the Finnish ambassador met me and she said she liked it too. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in a technical machine, and itself becomes a motor, a machine of tech, in other words, a producer of speed. I think it's quite profound. Now saying, as we look around the world today, we can see a battle for the street from the streets of Bujumbura, Ouagadougou, and Baltimore, interestingly. In November last year, I wrote about Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa, and concluded that we need to ask ourselves how many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead in such a situation that Nkurunziza finds himself in, for example. 100. I think it's less than 100 in Burundi right now. 1,000, 10,000. And I said, this is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent cannot go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. And I was talking about Burkina Faso, but I think it applies to Burundi as well. Jammy forums, or rather cryptic and at times very contrary, tweeted Nkurunziza in the mid-1990s in Tupac Shakur's "Me Against the World" t-shirt. Put that. And then I'll just give you a few tweets that I tweeted during the day yesterday. I said, from Ouagadougou to Bujumbura, African leadership is being upended. And I did that tweet where I said, this is cute, given it looks like President Kikwete laid a delightful trap for Pierre Nkurunziza. And I said also, the lesson from Milton Obote to Pierre Nkurunziza is never leave the country. You might never come back. Put up a photograph of Princess Margaret meeting Milton Obote in Uganda in 1965. Vice, which always has an interesting and tangential look at world affairs, says, pray it rains like hell. Fighting heats up as South Sudan's dry season winds down. South African all-share firmed up 0.22% yesterday. It's up 10.12% year to date, and probably the best performing big market in Africa. Dollar rand below 11.90. Let's see how we trade around these levels. Egyptian pound 762.94. The Egyptian stock market is down 3.29% year to date. They're apparently buying some S-300 missiles from Russia. Nairobi all shares up 1.69% year to date. That's the Nigeria all share. The Bank of Ghana unexpectedly raised its key interest rate to 22%. That's a 1 percentage point increase. risks to both inflation and growth are elevated but tilted more to inflation 1%. It was therefore noted that a further moderate tightening, complemented with sustained fiscal consolidation efforts, could rein in inflation and inflation expectations. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 2.48% this year. I like this photograph of the Somali coast seen from the air. Apparently a crew of an Iranian fishing boat that washed ashore were kidnapped by Al-Shabaab militants yesterday. Coming to Kenya, the central bank sold an unspecified amount of dollars in the previous session. Deputy Governor Harun Sirima said the regulator would curb speculation in the currency market. And this is a Reuters report. We're also starting to see a lot of corporate clients looking to lock some forwards because I think they feel there is panic in the market that the shilling could lose towards the 100 mark. That will be a real psychological problem, I'm afraid. Shilling has lost 5.9% so far this year against the dollar. In the stock market, the benchmark NSE 20 fell 0.65% to a December 2014 low. I said the market has been getting hammered lately. Some foreign investors are booking gains before the shilling weakens any further. Kenya shilling is at 96.5. Sasini Tea and Coffee reported first half earnings before the opening bell. Revenue was down actually to 1.268 billion from 1.377 billion shillings last time. They reported a loss before tax of 131.425 million versus a profit last time of 14.744 million. Earnings per share from its operating activities was negative 23 cents versus positive 17 cents last time. EPS from its biological assets was negative 19 cents from a negative 0.07 cents last time. First half EPS is negative 42 cents versus a small profit of plus 10 cents last time. Now, tea prices had been on sort of multi-year lows and then embarked on a very strong rally and are now at 2011 highs. And if you look at this reporting period, the prices had started to improve. So I'm not sure what exactly has happened. I would have expected a firmer performance given that backdrop that I just described. They do not seem to have ridden the rebound, but anecdotal chatter is that Mr. Mirali, who is the principal of this company, Sasini Tea and Coffee, is looking to exit, and there'll be a lot of value creation in the event they convert some of their land into real estate and sell it. They will extract a lot of value because the company is carrying its land at cost. Nairobi All shares plus 2.688% so far this year and is at a 13-week low. Fell sharply yesterday, 1.29%, which informed that comment I made to Reuters. NSE 20 down 2.58% year to date and at 19-week lows. Kenya Airways has announced the resumption of daily flights to Liberia's capital Monrovia after the government lifted a 9-month ban estimated to cost the airline more than 4.2 billion shillings of revenue. So that would be a great relief. It's highly profitable. It's a jewel in their crown. Basically uplifting West Africans into Asia through Nairobi. So that's a bit of positive news in what has been quite a difficult period for the national airline. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I am grateful.